The 7 signs of true evil most people never notice. December 26, 1502. The first light of dawn crept across the town square of Cesena, Italy. Merchants opened their shutters, farmers prepared their carts, children ran through the cold morning air. Then someone screamed. In the center of the square lay the body of Romero de Orco, the most feared man in the region. His corpse had been cut in half. A blood-stained knife rested beside him. His severed hands were arranged almost theatrically, as if begging for mercy that never came. Within hours, the town erupted in celebration. The tyrant was dead. What the people didn't know was that Romero had not been murdered by an enemy. He had been executed on the direct orders of the man he served with absolute loyalty, Cesare Borgia. The same Cesare Borgia who fascinated Niccolo Machiavelli. The same Cesare Borgia who became one of the inspirations behind The Prince. And perhaps one of history's clearest examples of something we rarely recognize until it's too late. True evil. Most people imagine evil as loud. They imagine shouting, threats, violence, and obvious cruelty. Movies have trained us to expect monsters that announce themselves. Reality is far more dangerous. Real evil smiles. Real evil calculates. Real evil waits patiently while everyone around it feels perfectly safe. For decades, forensic psychologist Robert Hare studied some of the world's most dangerous psychopaths. What disturbed him wasn't their brutality, it was their calmness. They could discuss horrific acts with the same emotional tone most people use when discussing love. No anger, no guilt, no hesitation, just cold composure. Because evil is not a matter of emotion, it is a method, and that method often reveals itself through 7 unmistakable signs. The first sign is what Machiavelli witnessed in Cesena. Sign 1: the sacrificial proxy. Cesare Borgia needed to bring order to a chaotic region filled with crime, corruption, and violence. But he also understood a political problem. Someone will have to do the ugly work. Someone will have to enforce order through fear. So he sent Romero de Orco. Romero carried out mass punishments, public executions, and brutal crackdowns. Within 2 years, peace returned, but the people hated Romero, not Cesare. When stability had been achieved, Cesare removed the final obstacle. He executed Romero himself and displayed his body in public. Suddenly the people saw Cesare as their savior. The cruelty had been outsourced. The blame had been outsourced. And when the consequences arrived, the proxy was sacrificed. A truly manipulative person rarely gets their own hands dirty. They recruit others to do it. A subordinate, a sibling, a spouse, a loyal friend. Then, when the fallout arrives, they step back and say, "I had nothing to do with it." If someone constantly benefits from conflict while others take the blame, pay attention. You may be watching a script rather than a coincidence. Sign 2: the rehearsed story. Robert Hare noticed something unusual when interviewing psychopaths. Their stories were too perfect, too smooth, too consistent. Normal memory is messy. When healthy people recall the past, details shift, dates change, descriptions evolve, small corrections appear naturally. But psychopaths often tell the exact same story every single time, word for word, because it isn't a memory, it's a performance. Think about that. When someone has repeated a carefully crafted life story dozens of times, they no longer remember the actual events. They remember the script, the ex-partner who was always crazy, the childhood tragedy told with identical phrases every year, the heroic struggle that somehow paints them as the victim and the survivor simultaneously. Real memories breathe. Scripts don't. The more polished the story, the more carefully you should listen. Sign 3. The calibrated confession. This is where many intelligent people get trapped. The manipulator admits small flaws. They confess to minor mistakes. I can be a little controlling. I wasn't the best partner. I used to lie when I was younger. You interpret this as honesty, but often it serves a different purpose. Psychologist Robert Cialdini discovered that vulnerability creates trust. When someone reveals a weakness, we instinctively lower our defenses. The manipulator knows this, so they confess to harmless sins to distract attention from larger ones. The small confession becomes psychological camouflage. Later, when evidence of serious manipulation appears, your mind remembers their earlier honesty. You think, well, they admitted their flaws before. Exactly. That was the point. Never judge honesty by what someone admits. Pay attention to what they never discuss. The darkest rooms are rarely the ones being shown. Sign 4. The asymmetric memory. Sooner or later, you notice a strange imbalance. They remember every mistake you've ever made. The forgotten birthday. The delayed text message. The comment you made months. Nothing escapes their memory. Yet when you mention something they did wrong, everything becomes blurry. I don't remember it that way. You're exaggerating. That never happened. Psychologists call this selective memory. But in manipulative personalities, it becomes a weapon. Your mistakes are archived. Their mistakes are erased. The result is predictable. Every disagreement becomes a courtroom. You are always the defendant. They are always the victim. Over time, you begin questioning your own perception, and that doubt becomes their greatest advantage. Sign 5. The loyalty test. The most dangerous people rarely ask for major betrayals at first. They start small, a secret, a favor, a side to choose in a conflict you barely understand. Perhaps they ask you to avoid someone. Perhaps they encourage you to share information that isn't yours to share. The request feels insignificant, but it isn't. It is a test. Machiavelli understood that loyalty is easiest to measure through action. Once you betray someone on behalf of another person, even in a small way, something changes psychologically. You become invested. Now you share ownership of the decision, and people tend to defend what they've already committed to. The first compromise opens the door. The second becomes easier, then easier still. Before long, you find yourself supporting behaviors you never would have accepted in the beginning. Not because they changed, because you did. Sign 6. Intermittent cruelty. This sign explains why so many victims stay. In the 1950s, psychologist Skinner discovered something remarkable. Animals became more attached to rewards delivered unpredictably than rewards delivered consistently. The uncertainty itself created addiction. Human relationships are no different. The manipulator is not cruel all the time. That would push you away. Nor are they kind all the time. That would make them predictable. Instead, they alternate. Warmth, distance, affection, coldness, praise, criticism. The cycle never stabilizes. Your nervous system becomes trapped searching for the next reward. Psychologists call this traumatic bonding. The occasional moments of kindness become emotionally powerful because they are rare. Victims begin chasing the version of the person they met in the beginning. The version that appears just often enough to keep hope alive. Not because the relationship is healthy, because the uncertainty is addictive. Sign 7. Moral inversion. This is the final and most dangerous sign. The ability to convince you that you are the problem. When you confront them, they become hurt. When you set boundaries, you're accused of being selfish. When you leave, you're abandoning them. When you remember what happened, you're bitter. No matter what you do, the moral burden somehow lands on your shoulders. Political philosopher Hannah Arendt observed something similar while studying some of history's darkest figures. Many did not see themselves as villains. They genuinely viewed themselves as victims, as heroes, as misunderstood people reacting to unfair circumstances. This is what makes moral inversion so effective. The manipulator isn't always pretending. Often they truly believe their own narrative, and because they believe it, they communicate it with conviction. Over time, you begin asking a devastating question. What if they're right? The moment you start doubting your own reality, the trap closes, because now they no longer need to control you. You will do it for them. The final warning. Look back at the 7 signs. Sacrificial proxy, the rehearsed story, the calibrated confession, the asymmetric memory, the loyalty test, the intermittent cruelty, the moral inversion. Most people won't recognize all 7 immediately, but when they do, something uncomfortable happens. Clarity arrives, and clarity demands action. That is why many people stay, not because they lack evidence, because evidence creates decisions, and decisions have consequences. Machiavelli warned that wise leaders prepare for storms before the thunder arrives. The same principle applies to life. The truly dangerous person rarely provides a dramatic moment that convinces everyone around you. Their behavior remains private, subtle, deniable. You may never receive validation from the outside world. You may be the only witness. And that leads to the most important realization of all. The greatest threat is not the manipulator. The greatest threat is losing trust in your own perception. The day you stop requiring their permission to believe what you've seen is the day their influence begins to collapse. Not because they changed, but because you finally stepped outside the reality they spent years constructing around you. And once that happens, the door isn't just open. You're free to walk through it.